As you might imagine, Chief Justice Roy Moore said, "I cannot do that. I will not do that. This is a Christian issue, and it's a states' rights issue. You have no business telling the people of the sovereign state of Alabama what we will or will not do in our own judicial building." The federal judge said, "Okay, we're sending federal agents to come roll it out the front door." But here's where the story takes a turn. You see, Fob James was no longer governor of Alabama at the time that this took place. A man with lesser character, with lesser spine, who was not a constitutionalist, who did not believe in standing upon the 10th Amendment in defense of his people's liberties. A new man was in the office of governor. And he sent word back to that federal judge that said, "You're exactly right. Judge Moore never should have put that thing in the Alabama Judicial Building. You send those agents and get that thing out of here." And both the governor of Alabama and the attorney general at the time both betrayed not only Chief Justice Roy Moore, but the people of Alabama and their liberties.
Yeah.
And the federal agents came in and they rolled that thing right out the door. Now, folks, that's the difference that having the right man in the office of governor in any sovereign state can make. You can have a Fob James who'll stand up for your liberties and use the 10th Amendment to defend those liberties. Or you can have a career politician, someone who's looking for a leg up to the next office. You see, by the way, just about 30 days after all that happened, the Attorney General in Alabama was given a promotion and was given a federal judgeship by the Bush administration, no less. So you see, folks, we have a choice to make. We better start finding citizen statesmen like Randy spoke about to fill every single office in Georgia who will stand up in defense of our liberties. Folks, as I close my thoughts to you today, we face a lot of issues. I know that the health care issue is looming large in all of our lives right now. But there are many constitutional solutions. In a meeting just about 3 months ago, Governor Perdue invited 200 business and political leaders from around the state to come meet and talk about the issues of health care and energy and some potential solutions to the problems here in Georgia. I was one of the people there, and after the health care segment, when Governor Perdue asked for questions or comments or suggestions from the audience, I stood up and thanked the governor for putting on the meeting, but I asked him, I said, "Governor, we know that national health care is not constitutional. It's nowhere found in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. Congress ought not even be voting on it. So with that being said, would you as our governor start the ball rolling now to make sure it's nullified here in Georgia, even if it passes Congress?" Now, folks, I can tell you, Sonny was not very happy with me for asking that question in his meeting that day. His face turned beet red, and Sonny hem-hawed around, and he never did answer my question in that meeting. But I'll tell you what did happen. Our folks from our campaign all over the state of Georgia started calling his office and calling a lot of state legislators, telling them we wanted this nullified in Georgia. About 3 weeks after that, Sonny sent a message to Attorney General Thurber Baker asking him to write an opinion for the state of Georgia stating that Georgia does have a constitutional right to nullify the health care bill. Now, Thurber Baker didn't do that. He's not going to do that. He's a liberal. But the fact is, we made a difference. Sonny wouldn't have done that unless someone put him on the spot to do that. Wouldn't it be nice to have a governor that didn't have to be told what to do when these things happen?
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Let me tell you some of the other states' rights things we can do to stop this before I sit down. First of all, our governor has already pledged to, even if he has to, appoint another attorney to file suit on behalf of the state of Georgia in the U.S. Supreme Court to block this unconstitutional act. Now, let me tell you, don't be surprised when the federal Supreme Court listens to this case and rules in favor of Congress and rules against you and the people. Don't be surprised, don't be shocked. We ought to do it, we ought to file the suit and give it a shot. But don't be surprised and don't be discouraged when it doesn't happen the way you and I want it to happen. Because that's just the first step in the states' rights process. You see, the next step is for the General Assembly here in Georgia to pass a bill of nullification to stop it at the state lines and say we're just not gonna play along with it in Georgia. You say, well, I thought the legislature already voted on that 3 weeks ago and it didn't pass. No, let me clear that up. You see, the Republican leadership in the Georgia General Assembly did not want to vote on a bill of nullification. They wanted to pass the buck off to you and put it on a statewide referendum as a constitutional amendment in November, so they didn't have to be the ones to vote on it. They were just voting on whether or not to put it on the ballot for you to vote on, which meant that as a proposed constitutional amendment, they had to get a 2/3 majority of the General Assembly to put it on the ballot. They came up a few votes short. But what they didn't tell you is that they're elected as your General Assembly to do that and to vote on those things for you. They don't have to pass the buck to you, and if they voted on it not as a proposed amendment, but simply as a bill of nullification like any other proposed bill in the General Assembly, all it would have taken was a majority vote plus one. And it could have been nullified already here in Georgia 3 weeks ago. So don't give up just because it didn't make it to the ballot for November. Put pressure on your members of the General Assembly and tell them when they reconvene next January, they ought to be voting on a bill of nullification for national health care in Georgia. That's the next thing we ought to do. If that doesn't happen, the Georgia Supreme Court could rule it unconstitutional. You say, whoa, you mean the Georgia Supreme Court can rule something done in the federal government unconstitutional? Oh, yes, they can. You see, there was a case in Georgia history by the name of Paddleford versus Savannah. Years ago in American history, I don't think anybody but Ray McBerry knows about the case in all of Georgia. But I'm going to share it with you right now. A man named William Henry Benning, for whom Fort Benning in Georgia is named, was one of the justices of the Georgia Supreme Court at the time, and he wrote the deciding opinion in this case, and here's what he said. He said, in all constitutional issues, the Georgia Supreme Court is, quote, coordinate and co-equal with the federal Supreme Court, end quote. Now, how would you like it if the Georgia Supreme Court stood up and put an override on the federal Supreme Court for a change? That's what states used to do. It's what we ought to do now. And if all that fails, don't fear, there's one last measure of states' rights that can be employed to stop it in Georgia. And that's to elect a governor who's willing to put himself and every resource at his disposal on the line in defense of your liberties. You see, governors used to practice something called interposition, where they would literally stand up and they would say, even if the state legislature won't help, I will use every tool and every resource at my disposal to block this from coming to my state, because I have a duty to uphold the Constitution of these United States and the Constitution of Georgia. You see, if you elect a governor who believes in interposition and nullification, your governor by himself can stop it if that's what it takes to do it. So folks, we'd better find that kind of man. I'm hoping you believe Ray McBerry's that kind of candidate. I don't think you're going to find another states' rights candidate for governor this year in Georgia. That's the reason I'm running. But you know, folks, what it all comes down to is this. For far too long, many of us have believed that we could go to the ballot box on Election Day and cast our vote for the person that was the best candidate, and then walk away on our merry way thinking we've done our patriotic duty and go about our merry way. Folks, those days are over in America. The days of thinking you can just go vote on Election Day and that's all you have to do as your patriotic duty, those days are over. And let it sink in, they will not be back in my lifetime nor yours if we are to regain our liberties that have been lost. I applaud you for coming and being here at a Tea Party rally today. Take heart. Millions of people all over America for the last 2 days have been doing the very same thing. There are plenty of us enough to accomplish what needs to be accomplished. But it's going to take every one of us getting involved and working. If I'm not your candidate for governor, you find your candidate. You get involved and you work really hard for that person. You get behind this man up here. And you work for him locally. You make sure if he does have any competition that we put a constitutionalist in that office. Yeah. I want to thank you very much for having me. I will be over here at the table afterwards today. I hope you'll come by, give me an opportunity to shake your hand. Thank you very much, and God bless you.